Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Davenport, Mayor of the City of Whitehorse, and I would like to welcome you all to tonight's Ordinary Council meeting. I'd like to remind councillors, officers and members of the gallery that the meeting, other than confidential reports, are now audio recorded and uploaded to Council's website with the purpose of providing greater access to Council debate and decision making and encouraging openness and transparency. Please note that any statements made by individual persons during a meeting are not the opinions or statements of Whitehorse City Council, and therefore Council accepts no responsibility. Councillors and officers, please ensure that your microphones are on when speaking. I will now formally open this Ordinary Council meeting and kindly ask that you all stand for the opening prayer and statement. We give thanks, O God, for the men and women of the past whose generous devotion to the common good has been the making of our city. Grant that our own generation may build worthily on the foundations they have laid. Direct our minds to all we plan and determine is for the well-being of our city. Amen. In the spirit of reconciliation, Whitehorse City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. Please be seated. I would now like to introduce our councillors and senior officers here this evening. Councillors on my left, Councillor Raylene Carr.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Councillor Bill Bennett.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
Councillor Blair Barker.
Good evening, thanks for coming.
Councillor Tina Liu.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Councillor Sharon Ellis.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Councillors on my right, Councillor Ben Stennett.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Councillor Prue Cutts.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. A special night this evening with the proposed budget. Thank you.
Councillor Denise Massoud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
Councillor Andrew Munro.
Good evening all and welcome.
Senior officers on my left, Chief Executive Officer Miss Nolene Duff.
Good evening.
Acting General Manager Infrastructure Mr Simon Kingsey.
Good evening.
General Manager Corporate Services Mr Peter Smith.
Good evening.
Senior officers on my right, Acting Executive Manager Governance and Customer Service Miss Michelle Baldwin.
Good evening.
Acting Team Leader Governance Mr Ralph Anania.
Good evening.
General Manager City Development Mr Jeff Green.
Good evening.
General Manager Human Services Miss Terry Wilkinson.
Good evening.
And in the gallery, Manager Communications Miss Sally Freud. Councillors, I'll go to the second item, which is apologies. As we have full attendance tonight, we don't have any apologies. I'll go to item number 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors and officers, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest in regards to any matter on tonight's agenda? If so, can you please disclose that interest and the nature of that interest? There being none, item number 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, the next item of business is a confirmation of minutes from the Ordinary Council meeting held 19th of March 2018. Councillors, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes?
So moved.
Councillor Munro moved and Councillor Bennett seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion to a vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item number 5, responses to questions. Councillors, the next item of business is public question time. I will now ask our Chief Executive Officer whether there are any questions submitted.
There are no questions submitted this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 6, notices of motion. Councillors, as we don't have any notices of motion this evening, we will move to the next item of business, which is petitions. Councillors, are there any petitions for tabling tonight?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Can you please give the title of the petition.
Yes, Mayor, the petition is to oppose the construction of a childcare centre for 128 children at 451 to 453 Belmore Road, Mont Albert North, lots 14 and 15, LP 29915 ECSS.
Councillors, you've heard one petition tabled. Councillors, are there any further petitions for tabling this evening? If not, I will seek a motion that the petition be tabled and referred to the appropriate officer for action. Can I have a mover?
So moved, Mayor. There's 113 signatures on this.
Yep, I'll ask for a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Barker, do you wish to make a speech, moving speech about the tabling of the petition?
Just a short one, Mayor.
Okay.
Mayor, this petition is been constructed in accordance with the rules. There are 113 signatures on it, and what's striking is that they are all local people that have significant concerns about the childcare centre. And in particular, the undersigned oppose the construction of the childcare centre at the above address for the following reasons: the large volume of traffic accessing a basement car park on the narrow side street of McColl Road, which will increase traffic congestion on Belmore Road and surrounding streets, and that there are currently 2 businesses on Belmore Road located within 500 metres of the proposed centre, and adding a large childcare centre will change the character of the area by creating a de facto commercial area in a residential zone. So that's a significant effort and piece of work from the first signed on this petition, Mayor, and certainly request that officers and no officers will view the contents very seriously. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item number 8, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business to be considered this evening? Being no items of urgent business, I will now go to item 9, which is council reports. Councillors, I'll first go through each of the topics separately and then call the items out one at a time. The first item is in statutory planning, 9.1.1, 74 Main Street, Blackburn.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Munro, seconded.
Happy to second.
Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, as councillors are aware, there was an application and a permit granted for this site, and what's before council tonight is some amendments within regards to the building envelope that had previously been approved. There's some internal changes and there's some changes of some fencing. It really doesn't trigger any additional planning triggers as a consequence of the changes. It's fairly much a procedural change, and there's not a lot of grounds to oppose the change because there is already existing planning permit for the site. So, councillors, I don't think there's much further to add in regards to this report.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Masood.
Yes, look, I agree with Councillor Munro. There were objections, and certainly when the first permit was applied for, it included removal of 22 trees, which I think, personally, I always hate to hear about removal of trees, but it is correct. The current objections for the change of moving a fence and changing some windows, going from, I think, 4 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms on the first level, etc., doesn't trigger another need for a different permit or anything, and so it's really just approving an amendment to the existing permit. Nothing more to add, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers, Either for or against, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.1.2, 451 to 453 Belmont Road, Mont Albert North. Seek a mover?
Mayor,
Yes,
I have
councillor.
an alternate motion for this.
Yep, so
proposal.
we've got an alternate motion that has been sought by councillor Liu. Can I ask that the alternate's placed on the screen and councillor Liu to give a brief synopsis of what that is, what the alternate is for the listeners at home?
Thank you, Mayor. This alternate motion looks at a refusal for this particular application. There are a number of reasons why this application is of concern, which is listed on the alternate motion up on the screen. So I would encourage everyone to have a look at that. Looking at things like neighbourhood character, the built form for that particular zoning, as well as some of the traffic issues around the area as well. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the alternate motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts. Councillor Liu, your moving speech, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, this proposal looks at the development of a 128-place childcare centre on 451 to 453 Belmore Road, Mont Albert North. After much deliberation, councillors, I've come to the decision that I cannot support this proposal as it currently stands due to a number of key concerns. So I just mentioned previously regarding traffic and congestion, that is certainly one of the key issues of this particular site. It's located on the corner of Belmore Road and McCall Road, with proposed access into and out of the facility from McCall Road. Councillors, it's noted in the report that this area is already subject to a number of traffic and parking issues. I'm also quite familiar with the area and have personally experienced the difficulty of navigating through McCall Road, and I consider myself a pretty good driver, especially when there are a lot of cars parked on the street. And this will further this is further complicated by the fact that McCall Road is a very narrow street as well. I do acknowledge and appreciate that in the report there are some conditions placed on this particular application. However, I don't think it addresses the potential bottleneck and congestion of patrons trying to turn into McCall Street from Belmore Road or travelling southbound down McCall Road. And let's be honest, when you have a lot of cars piling up and turning in and out from all different directions and you're trying to navigate your way through, it may take a while for one to notice, potential electric signage advising of how many car parks are in the basement. I also note that there is a 60 townhouse development off McCall Street, so you could probably imagine the traffic and on-street parking it generates. There's also a bus stop right in front of the Belmore Road side as well. I also have concerns regarding the scale of the building and what it means for a zone such as a neighbourhood residential zone, which is characterised by leafy and residential homes. I do note that there is a number of trees that are to be removed from this particular application, and added on top of that, just the amenity issue regarding the play area on the first floor, so that's the second level, interfacing the neighbours' properties as well. So in terms of noise and overlooking, that is certainly an issue that needs to be considered. Last year in 2007, a permit was issued in Box Hill North, 582 Elgar Road, which is just down the road, for a childcare centre, and another one on 800 Station Street, which is on the other side. There are already a number of childcare centres in the area, with one at 290 Belmore Road, Bowen. It's not in our jurisdiction, but it is quite close to the proposed site. Councillors, I'm not against childcare centres. I think they provide valuable service to the community. However, given the location of this proposed development and the capacity that they're proposing in terms of 128 full-time children, without further traffic parking treatments, I am concerned that it will further exacerbate the current traffic parking issues in the area. And we also need to consider the safety of accessing the site as well to and from McCall Road, as well as the loss of amenity for what is otherwise a residential and green pocket of the Elgar Ward. So I do ask my councillors to seriously consider this application and its potential implications and to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I wish to also support the refusal to this. Whilst I understand there's a need for childcare centres in our city, this particular one I consider is in the wrong place. I'm most concerned about the congestion of the McCall and Belmore Road intersection, and particularly with regard to the number of dwellings to the east, which is some 55, 60 dwellings, and then opposite on Belmore Road you've got lots of four dwellings which have got 4 bedrooms each, and so we've got extra congestion which will be coming out onto the road with people parking. We understand also there's a bus stop right outside the centre there. So in terms of the parking for the parents, grandparents, guardians, whomsoever who drop their children off, that will be in McCall Road, and they'll be driving into a blind car park as well. And I also find that whilst that does happen, it is unsatisfactory given the position of this particular site. I know there's a need for childcare centres in our region, as I said, but I do not believe that this is the right place for it. In terms of the other amenity impacts to the local residents, I think these has been covered by Councillor Liu. So I encourage you to refuse this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. I seek a speaker against the motion.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, in recent times this council has been a killing field for childcare centre applications. So if you can't have such a centre on Highbury or Springvale Road, where can you have one? I've visited this site, and this part of Belmore Road is a wide road with dual lanes in both directions. It's quite wide, the visibility is very good, diagonally opposite the site, and it's a dual site. One of the blocks is fully cleared. Diagonally opposite is a church that I saw in operation yesterday. Opposite there's a large number of unit developments, and when residents presented to council just recently about the 60 units next door, I understand that's a former state school site. And councillors, given that it was previously a state school on the location opposite this site, it would have had hundreds of people coming every day. Far more, many multiples more than we're talking about for a childcare centre. So I ask councillors who are considering voting against this application, have they visited the site and have they fully appreciated the circumstances of the site? Councillors, there is an identified need for childcare spaces in this area, has been submitted to us. And we're talking about 128 spaces, so we're talking about between 100 and 120 families that are to be serviced by this facility. Now, I appreciate there will be a change in amenity to some of the residents immediately adjoining this site, and I note the properties immediately adjoining the site are objectors, and they may be here in the gallery tonight. But the environment ebbs and flows. Previously, there was a school basically on the other corner of the same street that we're talking about, and previously different circumstances. I know that there's a major sports clinic opening up just a few doors up. Obviously we'll have traffic coming and going. So there is development on this site, and I think Belmore Road is a suitable place. It's a visible place, people will understand the childcare centre is there and they will have easy access to it. And I'm sure we can manage the traffic amenities as they arise. There's almost a dozen pages of conditions in the report before council. And councillors, I just can't envisage this going before VCAT and VCAT upholding a refusal. I just cannot see the grounds with that we could sustainably argue at VCAT. So I think we have a responsibility to get the balance right between the amenity of the residents immediately adjoining the facility, but also the services that are available to our residents. Councillors, I urge you to reject the alternate motion, and I propose to move the substantive should this not get up.
Councillors, are there speakers in favour of the motion? Any speakers against the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Mayor, as the ward councillor, it would be very easy for me to go along with a refusal here, and there has been a huge amount of work go into this by our officers, and I'd like to thank them for what I thought was an exceptional report. A huge amount of work has gone into talking to our residents. And we've all heard our residents speak about this. As usual, intelligent, balanced, sensible people that are concerned for their area. And Councillor Liu's absolutely right about the traffic congestion here. It's the biggest concern that I've got. And when we distill the concerns that people have legitimately got, one was the overlooking effectively in the building bulk, and then there was an issue with the rubbish bins, bins full of nappies being outside. The applicant's actually been pretty reasonable here too and been very willing to make a number of accommodations to lessen that. Now, I actually have an amendment, if we get to that, it may end here, in order to provide further conditions to this building, Mayor. And, I'd go on the record that there was some commentary from our submitters that, that this would be childcare for people in other areas. Well, I don't just accept that, Mayor, because I've used childcare in Burundara as well, and maybe there'll be people from Manningham and Burundara that might use this childcare because they're coming to work here. Now, we can condition this here. My great concern, as Councillor Munro has said, is that if we refuse it, it goes to VCAT, and someone sitting in Collins Street that doesn't know the area, doesn't know the street, doesn't know the residents, doesn't know the micro-community, doesn't have that granular intelligence that we have of this significant landscape overlay. And I'd remind all councillors of that. This is where the big gum trees are in the streets. Many of you may not have been there, but it's a really beautiful part of our city, and there's a reason why it's got a significant landscape overlay on it. I wouldn't want someone at VCAT making this decision without the conditions that we're going to put on it, potentially, Mayor. And I also had an extensive discussion again, and for the benefit of the residents and the audience at home, one of the things that councillors cannot do is condition parking restrictions, Mayor, on a street as part of the approval for a number of reasons. Now, I've had a long discussion with the Manager of Planning, I've had a long discussion with the Manager of Engineering Services, who has, with his permission, enabled me to say that he promises me, and I'm putting it on the record for this tape right now, that should this proposal go ahead, it would be proposed that he would meet with and discuss with the residents and commence a survey of the parking on McColl Road and that now, and if it ever passes and it's built and goes into operation, and if
Thank
there
you,
weren't...
Councillor Barker. Your time's expired.
Oh, thanks, Mayor.
Are there any further speakers in favour of the motion? Any further speakers against the motion?
Mayor, just a clarification, do I have a right of reply?
Yes, you do, because there's been a speaker against the motion.
Thank you, I'd like to exercise that, thank you.
I'll ask if there's any further speakers against the motion. Being no further speakers, either for or against, I'll go to Councillor Liu for right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to touch base on a couple of points mentioned by both Councillor Munro and Councillor Barker regarding this particular motion. Now, Councillor Munro had mentioned that Belmore Road is a very wide road, and I agree, but with this particular application, the access is off McColl Street and not Belmore Road, and Vic Roads, as part of the condition for approving for supporting this application, was that the access in and out of this childcare centre is to be relocated to McCall Street. So that's one particular clarification. The other point that Councillor Barker mentioned in regards to going to VCAT, look, I agree that as councillors we need to have a very balanced and informed approach, but we can't anticipate what VCAT will come back with. A few years back, council had actually refused a development on one of these lots, and it was for 2 double-storey dwellings on 453 Belmore Road. It was refused based on reasons such as overdevelopment, sensitivity to the area, building scale, neighbourhood character, and issues around vegetation. It was upheld by VCAT, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll put the motion, which is the motion to refuse. Those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Division has been called. Those in favour? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Carr, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Cutts. Against? Councillor Barker, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Massoud, Councillor Munro. Declare the motion carried. Move to the next item on the agenda, 9.1.3. State Government Take 2 Pledge Program to support action on climate change.
I'll move that motion.
Okay, Councillor Bennett to move. Seek a seconder.
Yes, happy to second, Mayor.
Seconded, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this Take 2 Pledge motion is all about demonstrating our actions in Council with respect to climate change. So at the 2015 UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, you'll recollect that 195 nations, including Australia, agreed to keep the global temperature rise to under 2 degrees Celsius. So the Take 2 pledge is, working together we pledge to play our part and take action on climate change for Victoria, our country and our planet. Councillors, the climate change commitments that Council has already made or will satisfy in our current sustainability strategy 2016 to 2022 will be part of the actions that can be registered under the Take 2 program. There is no obligation for Council to take additional actions as part of the program, but there is, however, the opportunity to indicate future climate change actions that we may take. And you may remember that just recently some of the actions were articulated in the recent policy on becoming carbon neutral, funded by Council's proposed new Energy Management Fund. And furthermore, it's worthy of note that to assist us in some of these initiatives, state government funding opportunities are available in this area and may be enhanced by our involvement with the Take 2 pledge. But most importantly and finally, by pledging our support, Council will demonstrate climate change leadership to our local community, and I think that's the most important point. So, councillors, I ask for your support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And further to Councillor Bennett's comments, to pledge to inform our community and take action on climate change and be a leader, I couldn't agree more fully. I have got some information here which is on the Mullum Festival, which is on next weekend. And for those who don't know, the Mullum Creek area covers the municipalities of Maroondah, Manningham as well as Whitehorse. They're running a range of activities, including one which is next weekend, which is a presentation on climate change and the Mullum. Where are we now and where are we heading? And I'll read, with your permission, Mayor, just some information from this. Climate change is already having significant impacts across Australia that are affecting the Mullum Valley. Seasonal flowering is occurring earlier, heat waves and bushfires are more intense and more frequent, and rainfall patterns are changing. Much worse is in store if we don't rapidly and substantially reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
Point of order, Mayor. Can we keep to the motion, please? I'm not sure that advertising the Mull Festival is about the motion.
I hear your point of order. Please continue, Councillor Cutts, noting comments made by Councillor Masood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Masood, Mayor. What I'm trying to say is that we are surrounded by changes caused by greenhouse gas emissions, and by taking the lead with the Pledge 2 program, we are showing leadership in this area, and we're saying to our community that we take this very seriously, and we should be encouraging our community to sign up and take the Take 2 pledge as well. There are only about 242 people in our community who follow this at the moment. Why not many more? And the businesses and other community organisations listed on page 42 there could be many more. We've got Deakin Uni, Box Hill North Primary. We could be encouraging all these others to also take this pledge. So I encourage you to all please consider this, and thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Barker.
may I move an alternate?
Councillor Barker, alternates are typically dealt with after a substantive motion which has already been moved has been dealt with. So if you have an alternate, then that can be considered if the motion that's on the table now is lost. Are there any speakers against the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, this state government Take 2 pledge is nothing more than a political stunt from the Andrews government. I'm sorry, but it's fact. This is all about being 50% renewable. Now, I accept the science on climate change, and I draw all councillors' attention, and I'm sure everyone here reads the newspapers and watches the news, that Minister Frydenberg, who's the federal minister, which is at the federal government that under Section 51 deals with global affairs, has got the National Energy Guarantee, Mayor. And this is a fair income response to the energy crisis that Australia confronts, Mayor. And that is that it's a trilemma, as the minister describes it, and I think it's a really good way to put it, Mr. Mayor, because not only do we have to meet our global obligations under Paris and all the rest of these very worthwhile objectives, but our responses need to be, power needs to be reliable, and, it needs to be reliable, it needs to be affordable, and it needs to meet our climate change things. The Take 2 pledge is just political spin from the Andrews government looking to secure green preferences in the inner city. A far better alternative, Mayor, is to support the new energy guarantee, the National Energy Guarantee, which of course sees Australia meeting all of its international obligations. It puts downward pressure on household power prices, and we know people in our community are hurting with them. When we see our elderly and our pensioners turning off their heaters and turning off their air conditioners because they can't afford it, that's what we need, Mr. Mayor. The federal government, the state government should be consistent with the federal government. Local government should be consistent with both. There is no point in this is virtue signalling and spin from the state government. We're better than that. We shouldn't start this sort of self-righteous parading about climate change with Take 2. The far better response, Mayor, is to support the National Energy Guarantee. I urge all councillors to reject this. We're not an overly political council. Let's be sensible. Let's look at the global challenges that the federal government's adequately responding to. Thanks, Mayor.
Are there any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Luke.
Thank you. Look, while I agree that, policies around climate change and planning for climate change should really be bipartisan, I do support this particular initiative. Whitehorse Council has made strides over the years with a number of sustainability initiatives, and I think we as a council need to continue to take leadership and also encourage our local community in terms of looking at more sustainable living. It also is a good means for the community and the wider public to be kept abreast of what we've done what we are doing and what we will be doing in terms of addressing climate change and the implications around that. So I fully support this, this motion, and I urge my fellow councillors to do the same. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Masood.
I'm not sure if I misheard Councillor Barker, but I thought at one point he said that we should support both state and federal. My personal view is that any gains we have, and I don't mind whether it comes from the state or the federal governments, to be honest, are important for our community, as long as they're all in the right direction. That I don't have a problem with who sets targets, and I think the state government's targets are quite aggressive, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we did achieve it? So, yeah, my personal view is that I would support it because I actually would support both levels of government.
Any further speakers against the motion? Any further speakers in favour of the motion? Councillor Ellis.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I totally agree with Councillor Masood. Anything any government of any persuasion, whether it be state or federal, puts up that's going to help us with climate change, we endorse it, we embrace it, and we run with it. We cannot be nitpicky over whether it's the government of our choice or which policy we prefer. We just look at it and we run with it.
Any further speakers against the motion? Any further speakers in favour of the motion?
Mayor,
Councillor Barker.
can I just respond to some of the...
No, you can't, Councillor Barker, because you're speaking against. You get one opportunity. Okay. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against? No, I will give the right of reply to Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I don't think we need to overthink this because the motion is all about how we demonstrate our actions in council with respect to climate change. So, as other speakers have said, it's the positive aspects of climate change and carbon emission mitigation that's important. So what we're trying to do is set a leadership standard here within council, and hopefully our community will follow. The pledge of working together means exactly that. So working together, Australia has taken that commitment to keep the global temperature rise to under 2 degrees Celsius. We're just enhancing that by taking that Take Two pledge in line with many others. And I think, as other people have said, whatever can be done to demonstrate climate change leadership has got to be a good thing. So I would seek your support for this motion. Thank you.
Councillors, you've heard the speeches. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried.
Division.
Division has been called by Councillor Barker. Those in favour? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Carr, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Masood, Councillor Munro. Against? Councillor Barker, Councillor Davenport. Declare the motion carried. Item 9.2.1, tender evaluation, landscape construction services. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts move. Seek and seconder.
Mayor.
Councillor Barker. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, Mayor. I don't need to explain the motion, do I? Just
No, just need to speak to the motion.
Yes.
Because it's listed on the agenda.
Yep, thank you. Council manages and maintains approximately 590 hectares of open space and tree-lined residential streetscapes, and Parks Wide Department maintains these open areas with in-house resources and also specialist contractors. This is where this tender is looking for contractors in our landscape construction services division. Council specifies material selections and so on and so forth and the design, and they come in and do the operational work. Two particular organisations, Knox Maintenance of Selby and Gavin Lowe, trading as UDL Group, have been selected as the tenderers of preference of council. There were 12 tenders when this was put out on Saturday the 6th of January this year, and of those 5 were non-compliant and 7 were evaluated. They are evaluated against a range of criteria including the tender offer, the tenderer's qualifications and experience, their capacity to provide the services in a timely manner and the quality of their work. Also, occupational health and safety and equal opportunity points were also raised as a pass-fail. The particular companies who've been selected for this have been used by council before, and their provision of services has been excellent, with all referee reports being very favourable. And in addition, their business viability is being considered in this. So with regards to what they actually do, we've got it listed there, the general earthworks, conditioning, grassing, etc. So with regards to this, the estimated expenditure of this in the initial term is $1.5 million, with it going to $2.5 million if the option to extend is exercised. So, councillors, I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Barker.
Hello. Sorry, the light beeped when you were playing with the thing. Mayor, thanks very much. This is really well put by Councillor Cutts. This day and age, council doesn't have, and many people might think that we automatically have all of the landscapers and whatnot, but this is where we supplement our existing resources with specialist contractors. I've seen these people work before in other areas, and of course where we bring in this supplementary resource, Mayor, for things like landscaping around the new hockey pavilion, has been done really well, because of course a contractor that works for 5 different councils and the private enterprise brings best practice to it. They can invest in the capital equipment that we wouldn't necessarily be able to invest in terms of trucks and mulch pumping machines and things like that. So it does actually work really well in terms of our business model, which is we've got our own core people that obviously put out mulch and do the general maintenance stuff, but where we need to build things, this is done well. I've certainly seen the work that the selected tenderers have done in other places around the city, and it's been excellent, so I congratulate officers and the 2 successful tenderers. Thanks, Mayor.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.2.2, tender evaluation, receival, processing and management of green waste and timber waste at the Whitehorse Recycling and Waste Centre. I seek a mover.
Happy to move.
Councillor Ellis moved. Seek a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Bennett seconded. Councillor Ellis.
I think the motion itself is fairly self-explanatory, and I'm very confident that Councillor Bennett will be able to add a whole lot of words of wisdom to it. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Bennett.
I don't know about the words of wisdom. My voice is cracking up, but certainly I do support this motion that Barking have had many years of servicing this green waste and timber waste at the Whitehorse Recycling and Waste Centre, and I've used that facility on many occasions for green waste through my involvement with the Lions Club, who do backyard blitzes on a regular basis, and we take green waste to get that recycled at the Recycling and Waste Centre. So I would certainly commend this particular tender of Barking. I think that's a great name. It sounds a bit like my voice, a Barking voice. But anyway, they've been able to provide this service for the past 9 years, and it's been to an excellent standard. So I'd certainly support that motion. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.2.3, tender evaluation, litter bin collection. Councillors, I seek a mover of the motion.
Yes, I'll have a go at that one.
Councillor Bennett, a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, this is a motion to accept a tender for the collection of litter from public litter and public recyclable material bins. So the recommended tender is Wayne Cleaning Systems for a lump sum amount of just over $316,000, including GST per annum, for 3 years with an additional 2-year option. Total for 5 years expected to be approximately $1.66 million. So currently there are separate contracts for litter and recyclable litter collection. So now there'll be one contractor to do both. So they will make sure that the recyclable material goes to that stream and that the litter stream goes to another stream. So overall, a lot more efficient and a lot more effective, a cost saving of approximately $2,000 per month. So I'll move that this motion be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think members of the public would be surprised to know that we've got 367 litter bins in Whitehorse. We take our city very seriously. We like our shopping centres to be clean and our parks and all of our public spaces. And for that reason, we make sure we've got adequate litter bins and recycle bins for our community to use. And as Councillor Bennett said, this is a tender that we've put out and hopefully it's going to save us even more money along the way. So I urge my fellow councillors to support it.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.3.1, Whitehorse Reconciliation Advisory Committee. Councillors, I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Stennett, I seek a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts. Councillor Stennett.
So, thank you, Mayor. Council recognises and values the First Australians, particularly in our local community. Council is committed to reconciliation, and its commitment, I think, can be demonstrated through the Whitehorse Reconciliation Action Plan, as well as the convening the Whitehorse Reconciliation Advisory Committee, as well as a number of other initiatives. The Whitehorse Reconciliation Advisory Committee has a vital purpose to provide Council with input on recognition and reconciliation issues. It also provides oversight and input into the Reconciliation Action Plan. It's time to develop a new plan for the next 4 years, from 2018 to 21. The development of the new plan, nominations are sought to form a new Reconciliation Advisory Committee. So this motion is about endorsing those recommended nominations consisting of community groups, members, organisations, representatives and service providers as listed in the report to participate in the advisory committee over that period of time. The committee will comprise of 11 members as listed in the report, and it's quite a broad representation, quite a range of perspectives and experiences, which is great to see. I'll be chairing this committee, and I'd like to conclude by thanking the previous chair of the committee, Councillor Brewcutts, and the previous committee that served Council over that period of time. So I commend you to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Stennett, of the 14 who applied for the position, we have 11 who've been recommended, and I'd like to congratulate all the new members. They're from a very diverse section of our community, and we have 3 Indigenous representatives and a couple of local Indigenous residents. I'd like to particularly congratulate Anne Makajani, who's in the gallery, for re-nominating and getting on. And I'm sorry if there is anyone else there, but that's one person who I've seen who's who's onto this committee. It will be exciting times. The committee has been reduced in size somewhat. Last year we had about 15 representatives plus council staff and myself, and it was a rather large group to work with. So council made the decision to reduce this somewhat. So we now have got 11 plus council staff and 1 chair. Just in addition, under the financial implications at the end, council does support reconciliation initiatives, such as the flag raising ceremony, which is to commemorate Sorry Day, which is the 26th of May, to commemorate the Bringing Them Home report, which came out 21 years ago, which was about the stolen generation and about forcibly removing children from the Aboriginal families, which led ultimately on the 13th of February in 2008, just 10 years ago, to the apology by Kevin Rudd. Council also supports other initiatives, for example, the Mullum Mullum Festival, which is coming up next weekend and the weekend after, where there'll be a number of Aboriginal representatives speaking there, taking tours, looking at Aboriginal food and so on. And I commend that to you all. Also supports Blackburn Lake Sanctuary Harmonies Day as well. So there are a lot of things that council does, including the Box Hill Community Arts Centre and the art pieces as well. And there are, of course, numbers of Aboriginal art pieces in the magnificent Whitehorse art collection. So getting back to congratulating the new committee for this year, and I know that Councillor Stannett will enjoy working with you, as I did last year with the last committee, and I'd also like to say thank you to the last year's committee as well for working with me. Thank you, Mayor. I encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.3.2.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Jump the gun. I recognise it, but I'll read out the title for the audience at home. 932 Whitehorse Disability Advisory Committee, moved by Councillor Massoud. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis. Councillor Massoud.
Thank you, Mayor. As the current chair of the Disability Advisory Committee, I would like to firstly acknowledge the genuine input and commitment of all committee members who have served on the committee in the last term. The committee has functioned extremely well, and all participants were able to bring varied perspectives across many issues and good ideas to submit to government requests. The respectful way participants engaged with each other and officers created a high-functioning committee who are able to achieve good outcomes for our community. I thank the 6 members who are retiring after giving such good service, and also the 6 who are going to continue, I think is fantastic. The Disability Advisory Committee has an important role in providing a level of review for accessibility for many buildings and parkland areas. This was particularly evident in their role where they contributed to discussions and advocacy for place-based design, for example, Blackburn Lake, lifts at Blackburn Station, and they worked with officers and media there to achieve a partial win for our community. And also, with the commencement of the NDIS in our region, there has been a strong focus for advocacy and sharing knowledge within our community as people are challenged by the stages of the NDIS. I think what's heartening is that we have had some new applicants, which is fantastic, and some renewal will always keep a committee fresh. And it is good to see that with 6 new members and 6 existing members choosing to continue, we will enjoy a good ongoing balance of new perspectives and ideas and existing knowledge sharing. So I welcome the new members to the committee, and I really look forward to working with all the members, and I ask councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massoud. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was surprised when I looked at the motion and saw that it commenced in 2004, which is 14 years ago. I was actually the chairperson of the first action group, the Disability Advisory Group, and I didn't realise it was so long ago. It's been wonderful. It's grown during that time. I think we've focused on a broader range of issues over those years, and of disabilities too. I seem to remember in the early years when we were recruiting new members for the committee, we were hopeful of getting people that brought a different perspective. One of the interesting things to me is that not only was I on there for a long time, but Councillor Masood is staying on there too for a long period, which means that we recognise the role we've got to play, and we also find it's so rewarding to work with such dedicated people in our community. And when I looked at the list of names, there's several that were on there at least a decade ago and they've been committed. In fact, 2 of those people started on our committee about 12 years ago, and they met and married. And we have a married couple here. Several years ago they got married. They met each other. So we've got another role to play in our community that we didn't know about. But it's been a fascinating journey for me in the time that I was on it. And I think we have done some wonderful things in Whitehorse over those years. And we've raised the awareness, and the people that have served on this committee have raised my awareness, and no doubt Councillor Masood and everybody else that's been on that committee. And I congratulate the officers that have put in so much work. And I see that there's Ms Seddon over there who has been involved for probably a decade now. And of course Maureen Darcy. These are the people that do behind the scenes work, and we as chair people get to come in and meet these magnificent people that are so committed to their community, knowing that the officers will do all the work for us, and we've got the background in front of us. So congratulations, and I welcome the new committee, and I'm very excited for them, and I look forward to a wonderful report next time. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Next item is 9.4.1, Proposed Budget 2018-2019. Seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Masood, a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Munro. Councillor Masood.
Thank you, Mayor. As an introduction, Council operates using an integrated planning and reporting framework to guide us and to identify community needs and aspirations. And we have a long-term view, which is our council vision, a medium term, the council plan, and then the short term is the annual budget. And tonight we have the draft budget for 2018-2019 before us to consider. For those here at the council chambers, you've probably picked up a copy of the proposed budget, but for those at home, I'll just read some of the key things on page 2 of the document, and then I'll move on to a couple of highlights that I would like to talk about. So, key budget highlights, I guess we have a $64 million capital works program, which is comprising in a number of categories, $40.8 million for land, buildings and building improvements, $5 million for roads, bridges and off-street car parks. We have to do that regular maintenance. It's really important to ensure that we are cycling through and doing the maintaining that we need to complete. We've got $4.46 million for parks, open space and streetscapes. In the operational budget, a couple of items, $15.14 million for sustainability, waste and recycling. That's certainly going to be a challenge for us with some of the changes happening in the waste and recycling area, but I believe we are well equipped to move forward with that. And $14.3 million for home and community services, which is just absolutely something that such a large majority of our residents rely on, that support. We have 12.6 million for leisure facilities and 11 million for health and family services. Again, an absolutely essential range of services that we need to provide. 10.7 million approximately for parks wide, and of course then we've got money going to planning and building services because we're getting a lot of development in the area, and our planning team and the building teams are certainly extremely busy. And that's only probably half of that list on page 2. But a couple of key things that I really wanted to pick out tonight. And I guess to say that our budget needs to link with our council plan. And so if we look at Strategic Direction 1, our goal for that is a safe, inclusive, resilient and diverse community which benefits from good health and well-being through the delivery of services, facilities and initiatives. A couple of big things that I think are really positive for our community is the Whitehorse Centre redevelopment, which has $3 million allocated to progress this project in our next financial year. It will take several years, but when it is finally completed, it just cannot be overestimated. It will be truly accessible for all and provide opportunities for people to engage in the arts, festivals and recreation, and that leads to social connectedness and cultural diversity. We also have, and it's a small amount, but we've allocated $80,000 to manage sports club growth and demand in Whitehorse proactively, and many of our clubs are seeing unprecedented growth due to additional participation of females. To further support another of our goals, which is a well-connected city with a balanced approach to growth supported by infrastructure and development that respects our neighbourhood character, in our draft budget we have allocated $3.43 million for projects to redevelop pavilions at Moreton Park, Walker Park, Elgar Park South and Tarara Park. I know our newer pavilions are much valued by those using them and appreciated for the quality building outcomes which integrate well into the neighbourhood character and attract growing community participation. These will be 4 more high-quality facilities for community use. Strategic Direction 3 is to protect and enhance our open spaces. Our community value the natural environments, and we have allocated $0.8 million to progress the implementation of our municipal-wide trees study. And we currently have interim controls which we cannot let expire. And also I would like to add that we will continue with our tree education program, and I will stop there. Thank you.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm pleased to report that with this $2001 million budget, the finances in Whitehorse are good. Even allowing for the 2.25% rate cap imposed by the state, we're able to maintain our high quality services, also maintain a most desirable natural environment and a strong $64.2 million capital works program. So where does the money come from? Rate income is budgeted at $115.95 million, so that's obviously a bit over half of the revenue. Some of the other money comes from fees and services, and we do receive some state and federal grant money to run some of the programs on their behalf. The budget before us has a strong surplus of $31.141 million, which provides funds for future development of our city. I acknowledge the federal member for Deakin, who's pledged $500,000 for Moreton Park and $400,000 for Walker Park for the development of the facilities there, and I'm sure councillors may speak about that further. And in that regard, can I thank officers tasked with the additional work in accommodating these 2 projects. So in closing, I also acknowledge the work of officers, and the budget process starts well into the previous calendar year behind us. And they do a tremendous amount of work, and they've presented for us a high quality document, and they present councillors with a great deal of information, and so they spend a fair bit of time engaging in our various requests and giving us the information that we require and more to do our job. So we certainly thank them for that. I commend the 2018-19 budget for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Oh, thanks very much, Mayor. This budget contains a number of things that we should be very proud of because it proves to our people that we've actually been listening to them. Bicycle parking in the Watt Street car park, a really clever use of our existing resource to better activate active transport to Box Hill. The netball courts at Mont Albert Reserve to be resurfaced, again, fabulous. The pavilions, brilliant. We know the growth that we've got in girls' sport and how these pavilions bring our communities together and empower people. The Sparks Upper car park, the relative stability in our waste charges, it shows what a great job officers have been doing in setting up our contracts. There's good utilisation of facilities. You'll see in the budget that the Town Hall, SportsLink, Anchorlink are all getting increased usage. There's the new visioning exercise for the Box Hill and the traffic study. However, I have a number of very, very serious concerns. I'll start with the language used in the budget. It's a rate cap of 2.25%, which is in line with the fair go rates. Mayor, I put it to you, this isn't straight talk and this isn't plain English. It's prevaricating. And what this is, Mayor, is actually the maximum...
Councillor Barker, point of order has been called by Councillor Stannett.
Is Councillor Barker speaker in favour or against?
I'll let Councillor Barker conclude his speech, but at this stage it's in favour.
It is in favour, Mayor, but I'm making some points in terms of the document. Because this is the maximum that's allowed without reference to the Essential Services Commission. Let's not obfuscate this. Rates are set by this council, us. They go up because we spend more and more of our ratepayers' money. In Box Hill North, where I live, in my micro community, rates are going up 6.3%. People out there in our community are hurting. And we noted in this budget, private sector incomes are going up 1.4%. Not here, the costs are going up 2.25%. The real rate revenue is up 3.3%. The cost of living pressures, the cost of utilities. Mayor, these are here. I also point out that the book regarding the Matsudo relationship, commissioning a book to write about our sister city relationship. You'll find a record of that on page 86, where it's discussed as an Assembly of Councillors. This needs to be discussed. $200,000 to write a book. I don't have a problem with a sister city relationship, but please, there are people out there that are doing it hard. And I'm also concerned about the amount of money that's proposed to be spent on the Station and Irving streets in terms of disability access and crowded place security. Councillor Leo and I have spent a considerable amount of time with a number of our disabled residents. That has never, and I've got a very dear friend of mine from the cricket and footy club and dog walking that's disabled. No one's ever mentioned this to me. And in fact, if we could spend that sort of money, there are other areas where it could be spent. I encourage everyone to comment on the budget. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Barker, I do note that although you were speaking in favour, some of your elements did raise concern. So I will allow the mover of the motion to exercise a right of reply, even if there's been no other speakers that speak, no speakers speaking against the motion. I will now move to a speaker against the motion. I'll move to a speaker in favour of the motion.
Yes.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I need to thank the officers and my fellow councillors for all the hard work and diligence in the preparation of this proposed budget. My broad view is that we are generally on the right track with this budget in delivering a responsible budget with respect to the use of ratepayers' money. A couple of things I'd like to highlight. As you know, I fully support the concept of our business improvement program. Delivering services to our community in the most efficient and effective way is a top priority in my view. The fact that a dollar benefit of only $300,000 though was realised in year 2 of the program I find disappointing. I'm hopeful that the 12 appointed improvement champions for this upcoming year, year 3, will improve significantly on this return, so time will tell. Another point, the Take 2 program that I spoke about earlier is a demonstration to the community of our commitment to sustainability and better use of resources. It was a disappointing outcome, therefore, that rebates to our community for such things as solar panels, water tanks, etc. has been scrapped in this proposed budget. The total annual cost to council is in the order of about $6,000 per annum. This I find quite petty and not in line with our general support of sustainability measures, and I'm
A
hopeful
point of order, Mayor.
that this can be reinstated.
Councillor Bennett, there's been a point of order called by Councillor Barker. Please state the nature of the point of
I
order.
thought the councillor was speaking in favour of the budget, Mayor.
I'll afford the same opportunity as I gave to yourself from your speech in favour. Please continue, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. So, councillors, what I do support wholeheartedly, though, is the review and the money to be spent for the development of a vision for the Box Hill MAC. And this is just timely that this is top of mind at the moment. So the sooner that we get on and do that, the better, I reckon. Also, another good initiative that I want to highlight is the implementation of guidelines from the current residential corridor study to address design of new developments along major road corridors, and especially along Burwood Highway in Morrick Ward. I think this is a good one and should lead to better outcomes for our residents. So at the Morrick Ward level, good to see some money for progressing things like Strathton House redevelopment, not before time, as well as money for Tarara Park Pavilion and Morrick Golf Course. And as Councillor Barker has said, hopefully we'll get plenty of comment and public submissions so that we can end up with a budget that truly represents our community. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually am speaking in favour of the budget. No doubt, no contradictions, and I'm not going to allude to any of the items in the budget because everybody can clearly see for themselves if they choose to read it. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the process. And as Councillor Munro alluded to, our process starts virtually the day after the budget has been put to rest, the previous one. And a lot of effort goes into it, but not only for the councillors get ample opportunity to comment. We have plenty of time to put up initiatives. We've got time to listen to our community. But the process does involve our broader community. I'm not sure what other municipalities do, but certainly in Whitehorse, we do have sessions where our community can come. Groups can come, our sporting clubs. All members of our community have the opportunity to have input into our budget. So what you see here is a finished product that does incorporate the views that we have got. And we had a session in this room not so many months ago where people could ask questions and make comments, and that's what we do at Whitehorse. We listen to our community. Not only have we listened in the preparation of the proposed budget, but there'll be an opportunity for submissions once that's out in the public arena. So I congratulate the officers for the hard work they've done and the councillors for the hard work they've done. And I also congratulate the community for putting some input into this very important budget.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Liu, and I have recognised Councillor Carr after. So Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this this draft budget. Over the past few months, councillors and officers have been going through the budget process, and I know myself and other councillors have taken on board the feedback that we've received from the community in terms of their needs to develop a fiscally responsible and sustainable budget in line with our council vision and strategic resource plan. The couple of councillors have previously mentioned that, you know, despite council facing a number of internal as well as external challenges and constraints, the proposed budget will allocate funds to ensure continued delivery of the breadth of services that council provides, including but not limited to health and family services, home and community care, upkeeping of community facilities, parks, gardens, playgrounds, infrastructure, waste and recycling, sustainability, as well as building and planning services. Part of the budget will also address the renewal and improvement of municipal-wide facilities and infrastructure, as well as a couple of key strategic initiatives that I just wanted to briefly touch upon, which will shape and provide long-term vision and planning of Whitehorse moving forward. So those include, you know, the revisioning of the Box Hill MAC, and as part of that, looking at more sustainable planning policies and urban design outcomes, as well as an integrated transport study in and around the Box Hill MAC. And, you know, that certainly will look at the different forms of transport utilisation, traffic flows, and, you know, issues and opportunities currently and for the future. So, for councillors, I think we are very fortunate at Whitehorse Council in that we are in a very solid and healthy financial position, which means that we could comfortably continue to deliver essential services, but also at the same time have that extra capacity to explore future initiatives for the betterment of our community. So I give support to this motion, and I encourage the residents and our community members to have a look through the draft proposal and provide any comments and feedback. Thank you.
Seek speakers against the motion. Seek speakers in favour of the motion. I do recognise Councillor Carr has tried a number of times. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. You have to keep trying. That's, you know, perseverance. Mr Mayor, I remind some councillors and certainly advise the members of the community, we are not here tonight to adopt the budget. We are here to adopt the draft budget so that it can go out to the community for consultation. They can then provide their feedback. They can check, the community members, sporting groups, community groups can all check to see whether or not their proposal has been included in the budget, whether they want to change anything on their proposal. They can then provide feedback. Then councillors may have negative comments. I'm not sure, it's entirely up to them. But to provide negative comments tonight, I find quite disappointing, because we have all, every single one of us, have had the opportunity to put our opinions forward. We have discussed it in great detail, and this is a joint budget. Whether we like it or not, this is a budget that we all 10 councillors should create, should own it. It's our budget, we're putting it out there. You may still dislike certain things, but this is our budget and we all must stand behind it. We then will consider community consultation when it is provided in the June meeting, and then we can discuss what the community have to say. We don't put suggestions or ideas into their head. Let them come back with their ideas. And I encourage all members of the community and sporting groups and community groups to check the budget out and read it. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any speakers in favour of the motion? Councillor Stannett.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, first I'd just like to echo Councillor Carr's words, some disappointment in some of the negativity that's been expressed. During the period of time this proposed budget was being formulated, there were some aspects of the budget that I wasn't entirely happy with, but the council laws as a group decided this would be the proposed budget, and I support that going out to the community and the community having their say. I would like to highlight a couple of important projects that council is working on, one being, of course, the Whitehorse Centre. Council, as we all know, went through a business case and adopted or resolved to go ahead with this project. It's the new Whitehorse Centre redevelopment and the car park, $78 million project. It's in its early planning phase, and proposed in the 18-19 budget includes $3 million from council reserves to continue the work on this important project, and I look forward to seeing it redeveloped in a couple of years' time. The community hub, as council knows, we successfully negotiated with the state government to get a discount on the purchase of the Nuttawatting Primary School site. They were going to sell it to the highest bidder. Part of that was the protection of the heritage listed 1927 building, the original school site, which is quite significant, and the open space. It's great to see that the new Nunawading Community Hub will be placed on that land. There's a budget of $28 million proposed in the 28-19 budget, includes $13 million to progress this project, which includes $10.5 million from council reserves. And I would like to mention the Matsudo relationship, the book that's been proposed. It's not just the book, but the body of research, the historical work that goes into producing such a book to commemorate the 50 years of our quite historic and remarkable relationship with Matsudo in Japan in 2021. It is the second oldest in Australia and the oldest of its type in Victoria. 50 years is a long time. And, you know, I think there's some people that value history and some people that don't. So in order to preserve that history, in order to recognise the significance of that relationship, not only significant to our city, but I would argue to the overall relationship between Australia and Japan in the sense that it's not alone in such relationships, the sister city type relationships and the history of those, but it's important to preserve history for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Any speakers against the motion? Councillor Cutts, do you want to speak in favour of the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, look, following on from everyone's very informative points, I would also like to encourage that this is the opportunity now for the next 4 weeks to put in public submissions. I encourage everyone to have a look through this, to look at the various line entries and basically come up with some other ideas if they choose, but also look at it with the whole of the municipality in mind, and I think that's very important. This is going to be a balance. This is a balanced and responsible budget, in my opinion, $201 million. So just I'd like to talk to a couple of things which are happening in the Springfield ward, and one of them is the Walker Park Reserve Pavilion redevelopment, which we're very excited that there's $547,000 going towards detailed design of the refurbishment of the Walker Park facility, part of $2.07 million for the facilities development. There are also other things such as the cyclical, and I'll talk small detail here, cyclical upgrade of play spaces. Now, it's only a couple of weeks ago that I had a resident contact with me with regards to a particular play space in Chester Avenue, corner of Cochrane Street in Mitcham, saying that this needed an upgrade. And I sent that through as a councillor request. And now I understand that that is actually going to be one of the ones which is upgraded. And look, this is the type of thing, I don't think that particularly had that response immediately, but that was already in the pipeline to be done. So it's really good that we have our community contacting us. There's another item in here about some drainage issues, which has also come up through the resident contacting the councillors. And I think this is what this is all about. It's actually hearing what the community really wants to hear. We've also got some streetscape mega mile precinct money set aside for $480,000 around the Nunawading, the Blackburn area, which is exciting. We've got a couple of parks in Springfield Ward, the Buckenby Park. There's going to be a landscape upgrade, which I think is fantastic. And we've got Halliday Park, lighting, power and water tap installation. So some of these are the small things that won't be municipality-wide important, but they are for the local area and the local people who use these very, very much. So one other thing I wanted to mention was with regards to the tree canopy cover assessment software tool. I'm very excited about this. One of my big concerns is about the loss of tree canopy in our beautiful city. About 2013, there was a nationwide survey, 22.9% tree cover in Whitehorse. This is lower than Stonington and Burundara. So this software is going to help us identify our tree canopy and try and, with the new controls and the significant landscape overlay, protect our environment. So I commend this to everyone. Thank you.
Councillors, councillors have spoken to the motion. I did foreshadow earlier that I would grant Councillor Masood the right of reply given some of the comments that have been raised in the speeches in favour. Councillor Masood, I give you that right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, well, I will again emphasise, and certainly a number of councillors have indicated it, it was a team effort. We made majority decisions and achieved a great deal, I believe, for our community. And this budget of 201 million, I have to thank officers for all of their diligent work because they have put in a lot of hours. I think as councillors we've been quite demanding about what we wanted to fit in and etc. And so I thank them also for the effort that they've put in for the community. I think this is a solid budget. There were some negative comments. I will just highlight, although the rate increase is an average of 2.25%, the average household is only 2.1%. I note Councillor Barker's claim, which is valid, that his suburb has gone up 6.3%. However, that suburb had the highest valuation increase of any suburb, and it is a revaluation year, and so when we look at it, if you get just an average rate increase of 2.25%, it equates to 65 cents per week. And yes, if you're unlucky to live in an area that has the highest revaluation, then I quickly did the maths, it'll equate to $1.83 per week. These things do happen. Whitehorse is committed to trying to do the best for our residents. We are very focused on trying to ensure we still deliver high quality services, and I think every councillor has committed to that, and I acknowledge everyone's efforts in coming up with this draft proposed budget. I do encourage our residents to go and have a good look, have a look at our council plan and give us feedback, because your views would be very much appreciated in any suggestions you have. Thank you.
Councillors, I will now put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.2 Council Plan 2017 to 21 Measures of Success Half-Year Report. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Masood, I seek a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Munro, second. Councillor Masood.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is a requirement to outline how we're performing against our council plan. I think it's very good for the community to know that we regularly look at our performance and ensure our accountability through annual reports and audited statements. The governance and management checklist measures whether a council has strong governance and management frameworks in place covering community engagement, planning, monitoring, reporting and decision making. And one of the items on that checklist requires councils to produce a report reviewing the performance of council against the council plan. And this report must include the results in relation to strategic indicators for the first 6 months of the financial year. This is the report required, and it does highlight or lists highlights that are listed on page 63 of the agenda. Just turn to that quickly. The highlights include the Positive Ageing Strategies Intergenerational Grants Program, which has seen completion of all projects, and a showcased event in December 2017. There were 12 schools with nearly 600 children involved and 6 older persons facilities with over 150 older people involved. Another highlight were 5 council sites that were retrofitted with environmentally sustainable design principles. Another one was Indigenous plants produced by the Whitehorse Nursery, and I'm quite a passionate believer that we have 2 Indigenous nurseries, Greenlink and Bungaluk, and they provide a great resource for our community, and the access to getting Indigenous plants, I think, is very important. They're always going to survive well in our climate. Another highlight was there were 252 corporate training sessions were delivered in the reporting period, with a total of 2,549 attendees, which is good because that means we are providing the training that we need to get good outcomes from staff. And also strong attendance at Whitehorse Business Week, with over 630 participants to 6 business events. And the Whitehorse Business Group, which works very closely with our business and economic development team, are able to, I guess, engage and activate people to come along and hear really important topics. I think we're very lucky that we've got a lot of small businesses. We don't necessarily have huge businesses in Whitehorse, but we've got an active business community. Some are small to medium, not so large, but there's a great dynamic amongst businesses in Whitehorse, and I think that is also another great highlight to acknowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Masood. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's not a lot left for me to report on. I think quite a comprehensive report from Councillor Masood. There is a requirement in the Local Government Act for us to have in our annual report results from our council plan and the measures. This report is the inaugural review of the performance against the 2017 to 2021 council plan, and Councillor Masood gave you some of the highlights, so I don't think there's a great deal to add. I urge councillors to support the motion.
Councillors, are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.3, surplus government land first rights of refusal.
Mayor, I have an alternate.
An alternate has been signalled by Councillor Bennett. Can you please briefly indicate the nature of the alternate while the text is put on the screen?
Yes, Mayor. Councillors, this alternate includes an additional point number 5 from the recommendation of the report on the agenda. This has all happened just in the last little while, so you can read that this is to do with demolishing buildings at some properties to do with the Healesville Freeway Reserve. So that is now part of the amended motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for the alternate?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Bennett.
So, Mayor and councillors, first things first, I guess, that the points of this particular motion seeks permission to formally respond to the state government's February 2018 surplus government land first right of refusal process relating to Vic Road's owned land located within the city of Whitehorse. So, councillor, ever since Vic Roads declared their intention to sell this parcel of land, the Healesville Freeway Reserve, council and the community have sought to protect this reserve for public use. And you may remember that the 2014 state election was the battleground for the two major parties to declare their position on the Healesville Freeway Reserve. The then opposition committed to preserving the Healesville Freeway Reserve as public open space. And on gaining government, it was confirmed that the Healesville Freeway Reserve would be converted to Crown land, with Parks Victoria being installed as the committee of management. So over the past 2 years, Vic Roads have been surrendering a selection of freehold land titles for conversion to Crown land. Some of the Vic Roads holdings straddle the boundary of the Healesville Freeway Reserve, and this is where the concern is. The proposition of eating away along the boundary of this linear park would be untenable to communities not just in Whitehorse but all those who value the protection of public open space in perpetuity. So it was certainly, in my view, the intention that the whole of that reserve, the Healesville Freeway Reserve, would be allocated to Crown land for use by the public along the lines for community use, open space use, recreation, etc. So the first right of refusal process that we're notified of on the 26th of February does not allow council to object to the surplus declaration by Vic Roads, but there's a 60-day window where we have to reply. So I don't really understand the background of all this, but seemingly our only option is to argue that any sale of land within the Healesville Freeway Reserve contravenes the commitment given by the government and needs to be rescinded and the land surrendered to the Crown. So further to that, there's a couple of other things on this reserve. The 18th T issue, that needs to be resolved. That's been bugging everyone for far too long. The whole issue has been increasingly frustrating with delay after delay. And now we've heard just in the last little while that there's been an application to demolish buildings that are on some of the leases that are partially on the reserve. And what we're saying is that this is premature. We need to halt this until we can get a better understanding of what's happening here from Vic Roads. So the motion here tonight is to authorise the Chief Executive to draft particular formal responses under the hand of the Mayor to ensure that we have some time to be able to actually get an outcome for the community that's going to be acceptable. So there is a deadline that we need to make this decision tonight. So councillors, I'd urge you to support this motion to give us time to ensure that we get the promised outcome for this reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I first became involved with the Healesville Freeway Reserve project in 2009 when Vic Roads completed their initial review. A lot has transpired since then, not the least of which was the great result in the last state government election with the newly elected government announcing the reserve would remain and be preserved as public open space under the management of Parks Victoria. This followed extensive lobbying by Whitehorse Council and local resident groups. I was at the announcement by the Minister at which he declared the entire 35.6 hectares would be preserved as public open space. No mention then of any land being offered for sale to Whitehorse Council or anyone else. It was a firm commitment for all of the land to be converted to public open space. The commitment was to transfer all parcels of land to the Crown. 3.5 years later, only 20 parcels have been successfully transferred, leaving a significant number, 15 in fact, still remaining to be transferred. I acknowledge some, such as the lifetime leases granted to residents, are more complex than others. However, I don't believe all of the remaining 15 parcels are as complex as they are made out to be. Council have been accused of staging a political stunt by moving this motion. May I suggest, by delaying the so-called complex parcels of land to just before or immediately after a state election could also be deemed a political stunt. I will happily be proven wrong in this statement if all parcels have been successfully transferred prior to the election. Needless to say, my statement exempts any lifetime leases currently in place. Also, at the announcement, a commitment of $500,000 to provide a bike path was given. The question was asked, what if this isn't enough? Who would fund the shortfall? The answer was whatever it takes for the Hillsville Freeway Reserve to be preserved as public open space and to provide a shared use path, the funding will be provided. It was clearly the intention of the state government at that time to provide all funding. Now it turns out that is not the case. They are proposing to sell off some of parcels of land that will impact on the reserve. This is not on. At the stakeholder meetings held last year, the sale of properties was discussed. However, at no time was it mentioned these would impact on the reserve. In fact, the impression given and assurance any property sales would not have an impact. It also seems Vic Roads have misinterpreted the boundaries of land owned by them and land currently under the Public Acquisition Overlay 3. They appear to have combined the parcels into one, declaring the entire lot surplus, which is not the case. This is clearly a decision in their favour to reap maximum benefits. Likewise, Council, by this motion, have determined a decision in our residents' favour to uphold the original commitment made by the state government and retain all of the Hillsville Freeway as public open space, and request the proposal to sell these properties be rescinded. I fully support Council's motion.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you,
Carr.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there speakers against the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ellis.
If you had have asked me 4 or 5 hours ago, I was certainly not intending speaking against it. But I've since got some more information that I think is relevant to this. Let me say at the outset that I do not support any political party, whether it be state, federal, Labor or Liberal, that does not honour their election promises. To me, that is not on, and it's not acceptable. So when I first saw this motion last week, I took it on face value that that was obviously the case, and was very concerned about that, obviously, like most of the other councillors. But I've since become aware of the fact that the issue of these houses was raised in the grouping that occurred, the advisory group. To give a little bit of a history of this land, it was flagged as potential housing to be sold off by the former government of the day, and this land was vacant as a result of the Hillsville Freeway not proceeding. And there was talk about it, or a clear intention that it become housing. In the lead up to the state election, the opposition, including the now Premier, came out and made the statement that this would be preserved, the Hillsville Freeway would be preserved as open space, but I don't think there was any commitment at that time on the adjoining houses. What the other part of the commitment was to set up an advisory group of residents and the 2 ward councillors and officers and all stakeholders, which was undertaken. Now, I have seen paperwork from the meetings that were held and the notes that were there in which the sale of these houses were discussed as an outcome that would have to happen in the future, but only when the tenants with life tenure were to vacate the houses. And I understand some of them have done that and some of them have not at this point. But the reason that those funds were required was mainly to provide the facilities that the community wanted on there. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the houses, I fully support that we lobby to have this delayed. I fully support that we lobby to have those houses kept in the freeway. What I do object to is this is seen as a breach of commitment of a promise that was made, because I can't see that occurring. I just simply think we have jumped the gun with this. Let's go and lobby.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Is there any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. In the documents is the Australian Labor Party's press release that they were going to preserve this as open space. Very clear. And in the same press release, they have a hit at the previous government that they're going to sell it off. Well, Australians, Victorians and the people in the city of Whitehorse have had enough of this mealy-mouthed weasel words from politicians. This is about the contravention of an election pledge. The people were undertaking that this land would be preserved as open space, not sold off. And frankly, if some state politicians think this is a political hit, I find that as an outrageous slur on our officers that originated this, because our officers have been looking after our land, the custodians of this land, looking out for the commitments that were made to the open space. I congratulate them for it, and I condemn the Labor government for this disgrace.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? As there's been one speaker against, I'll go back to Councillor Bennett for the right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I think there's some confusion here. There have been a number of leases that have been rescinded to the Crown, so that's fine. The leases that we're concerned about are the ones that straddle the boundary of the Hillsville Freeway Reserve. And I'd make the point that if in fact a freeway was going to go through there, then Vic Roads would have to come up with some kind of determination of how they were going to handle that. What we're saying is that now the proposal is that some of the land on that freeway reserve will be sold off to maybe private interests for development of housing or whatever. So we're saying that this is not what the intention of the Hillsville Freeway Reserve protection mechanism was. We have an option of saying we need to oppose this land sale application, and we need to do it quickly. So, councillors, we need to make that decision to put our position and make it clear to Vic Roads and the state government now.
Councillors, I will put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Division has been called by Councillor Carr. Those in favour? Councillor Liu, Councillor Barker, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Carr, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Masood, Councillor Munro. Against? Councillor Ellis. Declare the motion carried. Item 9.4.4, Municipal Association of Victoria, State Council meeting and submissions of motions for consideration. Councillors, I seek a mover.
So moved.
Councillor Munro, I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis, seconded. Councillor Munro, moving speech, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, really not a great deal to add. We have a previously submitted motion for the upcoming MAV State Council meeting to be held on the 18th of May. Motion need to be submitted by the 20th of April, so we are just in this report endorsing the motion on recycling.
Councillor Ellis.
Yes, not much to add. The State Council, the Victorian State Council, the MAV, is a wonderful forum for us to put up our motions and get debated on the floor by other municipalities. If they're successful, they will find their way to the national conference on many occasions, but it's a way of highlighting the needs of the local community and the needs of the local government sector. And I am pretty confident that this will get a great deal of support on the floor. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.5, Delegated Decisions, February 2018. I seek a mover.
So moved.
Councillor Munro, seek a seconder.
Seconded.
Councillor Masood. Councillor Munro.
Nothing further to add other than what's printed in the report, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Masood.
No, it's just procedural.
Are there any speakers? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 10.1, which is So item 10 is reports from delegates, special committee, recommendations and assembly of councillor records. The next item is reports by delegates. These are delegate items that are appointed to councillors from council. Do we have any delegate reports this evening? I will start with councillors on my left. Councillor Ellis.
Just one brief one. As chair of the EAHA, we have had a departure of our project worker, and we're now going to be looking at a new appointment in the near future. I'd like to congratulate her for all the work that she has done for us, and we do look forward to finding a replacement that will fill her shoes, and along the way we may learn some more things about what we like and how we're going to fight for some more affordable housing in the eastern region, and hopefully whoever we appoint will bring a slightly fresh perspective to us. That's the aim, and we'll carry on the good work that the previous project worker has done. Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just two items to report. One is in regards to the Whitehorse Business Group monthly meeting. So the discussion was had in regards to the Gala Awards. The preparation is moving along very well. The committee is also looking at a number of partnerships and joint networking events as well. There was also some talk about strategies to further engage with the local businesses in the area. And the second report that I'd like to note is just in regards to the Whitehorse Manningham Corporation's Internal Audit Committee meeting, which was held last week. We went through a number of key policy documents, including procurement policy and the procurement manual, investment policy, fraud incident procedure, financials and investment report, audit strategy, and internal audit reports around library collection management practices and information technology general controls review. So the documents were noted and endorsed subject to some minor updates and changes. And that's all from my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Yes, Mayor, just one, which is on the 21st of March, the Domestic Animal Management Plan Advisory Committee met, and it's really interesting that there was some excellent discussion around the result of some really high quality research and survey work that the officers have commissioned and had done around our parks and how people perceive parks and safety and dogs off leads and things like that. Whilst the report was originally seeking, I suppose, views around animals, we also uncovered a raft of really valuable intelligence about the way people view our parks. And I think some of that was really surprising. It was certainly really surprising for me when we started to examine the nexus with dogs, Mr Mayor, because we do have a very large variety of parks in Whitehorse, and something like the Blackburn Lake Sanctuary is very different from, say, Mont Albert Reserve. And the experts on the panel that include veterinarian made the point that, which I never actually realised, was how disturbing possums are by dogs that move through areas, which is one of the reasons I always thought dogs were kept on leads at Blackburn Lake because of disturbance to water life. They're actually disturbing other things. And that's part of an overall consideration that preceded me in terms of examining the positive aspects for dog ownership and animal pets, and looking at opportunities for more off-lead exercise areas, Mayor. So that's progressing really well. And there's also there's some recruitment going on of new and refreshed members of the committee. So it was an excellent meeting, and it's making good, steady progress thanks to the excellent work of officers that have commissioned pieces of work as we've been going forward. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, one report, Eastern Transport Coalition, that was held at Monash Council last week, April the 19th. There was a briefing from a couple of gentlemen from Transport TFV, Transport for Victoria, and the briefing was on the proposed Roval light rail. Light rail is synonymous with trams, basically. So it's either a tram or a light rail. But anyway, the briefing was on the proposed Rowville light rail that will connect Oakley via Chadstone to Monash, the Monash precinct, and then out to Rowville. Sean Lean was in attendance at that briefing. $3 million for the study. The government wants that fast-tracked. It could actually be a route for heavy rail in the future, so that hasn't been precluded. I asked about other tram infrastructure in Melbourne, in particular Route 75, the Vermont South tram line, with a proposed extension to Knox City. Didn't get a good response there, really. I'd say that's not a high priority. So what they said about the Rowville light rail, that's a much higher priority, and that will be supposedly Route 75, but on steroids. It'll be a more highly technical route. So Rowville light rail obviously will have priority over and above the Vermont South to Knox City extension. As part of this meeting, we talked about bus-related projects, and officers from all different councils were asked to submit bus-related projects. We talked about the Harrow Street pedestrian signals to enable better access to Station Street bus stops, installing seats at bus stops informed via the Walk Spot program, secure bicycle parking at Box Hill Interchange, installing real-time bus timetable information at Station Street, Harrow Street. That boarding location is the third highest in Whitehorse, apparently, so important for us. But each council had their priority lists for bus-related projects as well. So we'll see what happens in the future about that. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Along with Councillor Barker, I also attended the Domestic Animal Management Plan committee meeting. At the next committee meeting, it was a very interesting meeting, that one, but at the next committee meeting we're going to dedicate the meeting to reviewing both on and off-lead dog areas, dog parks. So I would encourage any councillors or any members of the community, if you have any suggestions, but please think about them. Don't just offer a local pocket park, because obviously that won't be feasible as an on or off-lead dog park. So think about it, and please let me know as soon as possible if you have any suggestions. Thank you.
Councillor Stennett.
Nothing to report. I'm looking forward to next month's report. We might hear something about the Mullen Festival.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I attended the Whitehorse Business Group meeting with Councillor Liu at 7:30, nice and early, on 10th of April. Just adding to her comments, the membership committee, which I'm part of this year, came up with a number of ideas to add or to hopefully improve the membership numbers, increase the numbers. We've had an Add One event, which is bringing somebody with us, and they'll be paying at the rate of the member. Adding not-for-profits organisations to the group as well as a possibility. So there are other ideas like that. And then there were also discussions around some networking opportunities to increase attendance at these events, and there have been some couple of novel ideas which we will be coming out with soon, but I won't say any further. Thank you.
Councillor Masood.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A couple of items. The MTF meeting on the 4th of April, we had the President of Rail Futures, John Hirsch, go through their rail program that they envisage. It's about a 30-year program. Interestingly, there's no Doncaster Rail in that proposal, but some of the links that Councillor Bennett talked about out to Rowville and others, and Monash University and how we get to those was quite interesting. There is a presentation coming out, so for those interested, I'll distribute that. Also, with regards to the MTF, I can advise councillors that MTF are holding pre-election forums, as they have done before the state elections over the last number of years, and we actually have one booked in at Box Hill Town Hall on the 30th of August at 6:30 p.m. So representatives of the major parties will be invited, and I understand the Mayor is attending. And so all councillors are welcome, and our members of the community are welcome to attend that and grill our state representatives and potential representatives on transport issues that affect us here in Whitehorse. On the 19th of April, and the Mayor was also in attendance, I attended the Metro Forum of the Municipal Association of Victoria, and a number of items we were briefed on. Rob Spence gave the majority of the presentations. Interestingly, Queensland at the moment has no landfill levy, so there's a lot of dumping of waste and recyclable material up in Queensland because it's cheaper from other states. Peter Clark mentioned his municipality is looking at converting waste into energy, and they're hoping to get federal support to do that. There was a state representative talking about Pick My Project. Councillors might be aware of that. It's a $30 million program, but I'm not sure that councillors were too enthusiastic about it, given the $30 million across all the municipalities in the state. They're projects between 20 and 200,000, so that money's available if council wants to apply. One bit of good news is the state's going to pick up the tab for property revaluation, so it'll save the sector $8 million. And the last thing I'll mention, two things I'll mention. The MAV have got video conferencing set up, so a number of their meetings will be able to be done by video conferencing, particularly for delegates that are a little bit remote. And the VBI, the Vested Benefits Index, which you might think, why is that of interest to me? Well, the good news is that's at 106, but the problem is if it goes below 100 for a period of time, there may be a call on councils to top up the defined benefit super. And I think the last call on our council was $11 million for council and $1 million for our library corporation. So we're hoping that we don't have any calls. And Rob Spence advised that Vision Super is taking now, given that the VBI is in positive territory, they're going to actually take a defensive strategy to mitigate the possibility there'll be a call on council. So I move my reports.
I have no reports, so I'll now seek a motion to accept the reports by delegates.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Munro moved, Councillor Bennett seconded. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Let's go to 10.2, recommendations from Special Committee of Council meeting on 16th of April. Councillors, as we don't have any recommendations from this meeting, we'll move on to item 10.3, record of Assembly of Councillors. Councillors, can I have a motion to receive and note the record of Assembly of Councillors?
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts moved.
Happy to second.
Councillor Carr seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item number 11, reports on conferences and seminars attendance. I'll start with councillors on my right. Councillor Munro.
No report.
Councillor Masood.
I have one report. On Tuesday the 17th of April, I attended the Metropolitan Local Government Waste Forum Plastics and E-Waste Tour, which was about a 10-hour day going around a number of recycle facilities. We started at a company called Green Collect, and I will say that a number of these organisations are also social enterprises, so as part of the recycling they offer employment for people who perhaps would otherwise not be in a job, so it's a positive side. At Green Collect, they sort and resell items from offices, for example, and they use the public service as an example, when there's a change of department name or whatever, there's often a lot of letterhead paper. They make it into notebooks, etc. And they also had, waste paper. They had coloured A4 paper, which you could get for $3 a ream if you wanted to go to their little op shop, etc. A lot of things there that certainly labour intensive, but they're actually giving training and building self-esteem for people who really do need some support. So it was really a positive outcome. The second place we went to was Moonee Valley Transfer Station, where they're actually, this was just recycling. It's not a pit for hard waste and rubbish. And so they were collecting a large variety of things and actually sorting it on site, which was good. They also have free mulch and compost, and I noted there was a resident who'd travelled from Bayswater who evidently goes there regularly with bags and fills it up with soil for free. It was very organised, and they do recycle polystyrene, so you can actually take it there and it's all left for free. Over lunchtime we looked at the Replas sort of recycled plastic furnitures and different things, but also there was a bin which I think I have noticed at Woolworths, I'm not sure where else it is, by a company called Red Cycle, where you can put your soft plastics, so your shopping bags, confectionery packets, your biscuit packets, so you open your packet of biscuits, frozen food bags, produce bags, bread bags, rice and pasta bags, and old reusable bags, those sort of fibre ones that start to break down eventually. And they recycle them all, and they actually go into helping to make road base. So they can be recycled, they don't have to go into landfill. We also then went to a company called Close the Loop, and I'll hold up here a pen, which is a great felt tip pen, totally made from recycled printer and toner cartridges. So, and they are available for corporates to order, get printed with their name, etc. And so a great outcome from a lot of the old printer cartridges and toners. Also, while I was there, they have a machine that cost $25,000, and it was taking huge tubs, I say, probably about 2 or 3 metre by 2 or 3 metres, and they said about 20 to 30 tubs go into this machine, which heats the polystyrene and compresses it, and it ends up in a tablet this by this and about this high, and they're actually exported to Malaysia where they are recycled. And then went to a company, MRI, where they particularly focus on computers, your tollway electronic tags, LCD TVs, etc. And they're looking to get more. They can't get enough stuff to recycle. And then we finished at Downer, who used the recycled plastic and glass fines to make road base. So we looked at that all ground up, and you could see little bits of coloured glass, etc., but it goes in to make the road base. So it was a very interesting day. There is an industry happening for recycling things in Australia. There was more there than I realised. And certainly I will be writing a full report and sharing it with officers to see if there's any advantage for us. Thank you.
Councillor Cutts.
Nothing to report this month, Mayor.
Councillor Stennett.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Carr.
Nothing to report, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, just a couple of quickies. On the 22nd of March, I, along with Councillor Lew and Councillor Barker, attended the Smart Cities Conference organised by CEDA, the Committee for Economic Development of Australia. So it was pretty well attended across councils and government departments. There were 4 officers from Maroondah, for instance, including the CEO. So they were very well represented at that conference. The keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Kennedy, Secretary of the Federal Department of Infrastructure, Regional Development and City, gave a broad-ranging speech about all levels of government needing to work together to achieve good outcomes. So many motherhood statements like that, I thought. But he did talk a bit about the city deals that have been happening in places like Townsville, Launceston and Western Sydney. So he kept making the point about collaborating with all 3 levels of government to get outcomes. maybe my fellow councillors picked up some other points from that particular conference. The second one I'd like to share with you is on the 12th of April, the video conferencing link with MAV. They had a seminar on recycling that was presented by SKM Recycling. Now, so I understand we don't use that service, but they are very much along the lines of future strategy of exporting high quality paper fibre to China. They believe that 3 new material recovery plants, one in Coolaroo that's coming on stream very shortly, that they believe they can meet the very stringent Chinese specs. They gave a breakdown of curbside waste collection by weight, and paper fibre is more than half plastic, 11%, glass 30%, metals 4%. They're concentrating on recycling fibre in particular. They believe that there's a continuing market that other countries may not be able to meet as far as export quality is concerned. So at the moment, China sources about 40% of its recycled fibre from the USA, but there's a political dimension, I believe, in these sorts of relationships. So SKM think that they may have some advantages in being able to fill that market with high quality fibre. So again, time will tell. Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Nothing, Mayor.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 items to report. The first item, Councillor Bennett had gone through already in regards to the Smart Cities Conference. Just the second one was I attended a conference by CEDA as well around energy, and included the keynote by the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, Victorian Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change. So this event was on the 12th of April, and it really looked at the state's commitment regarding climate and energy policies, as well as touched upon the National Energy Guarantee. Also mentioned were state renewable infrastructure projects, including wind farms, battery storage facilities, microgrids, grid-scale storage, and opportunity to explore hydro energy projects in regional Victoria. Waste to energy review. Waste and energy was also looked at, and a review and investigation will be looked into moving forward. There was also talk about better energy data quality and access to businesses and education sectors for research moving forward. And that's my report. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Nothing to report.
Councillors, I have 3 reports. The first is on the 20th of March 2018. I attended an emotional intelligence or EQ training course where I completed a personality test on my own type of personality. We looked at the 4 different types of personalities with regards to emotional, more about how express your feelings and these types of items, and how as leaders we interact with each personality type. We also talked a bit about resilience, which is covering the idea of when you're subjected to some adverse comments, that we as individuals have the ability to react or in our own way, and that was covered as well. Generally, it was quite an interesting course. It certainly highlighted a number of areas which I can look at and focus on going into the future. Generally a good course, which I'd recommend to others. The second item is I attended on the 18th of April 2018 Diversity, Leadership and Cultural Change that was held by CEDA in the city, and that was over a lunchtime. They had a number of speakers essentially looking at basically the emergency services and that are traditionally male dominated, and areas where they think that through change of hiring and promoting practices and looking at techniques of cultural change, that more diversity can be introduced into those particular workforces, and that was interesting as well. The third item was with Councillor Munro I attended the dinner only for the MAV Metropolitan Forum. My key takeaway from there was that generally when you listen to a number of other councils, that we generally do things very well in Whitehorse when you compare some other councils in the sector, and I just wanted to highlight that. It was pleasing to hear when councils were talking about their own individual circumstances. So with that, I will now seek a motion to move and receive, a motion to receive and note these reports.
Happy to move, Mayor.
And happy to second.
Councillor Liu moved, Councillor Ellis seconded. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. The next item on tonight's agenda is to consider 3 confidential matters listed. Accordingly, councillors, do I have a motion calling that the meeting be closed to the public to consider confidential reports, and that include matters of industrial and or contractual nature under section 89(2)(c) and D of the Local Government Act 1989.
So moved.
Councillor Bennett moved.
Second.
Councillor Ellis seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. For members of the gallery that are leaving due to the confidential items, you will have an opportunity to return, but that will be just close of meeting. You are welcome to return. If you don't, I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.